All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the third installment of DIY Attribution, hosted by CaliberMind. We have three amazing panelists today. As the series has progressed, the topics have gotten more and more technical. So we're bringing in some big hitters today from two of the top marketing automation and RevOps consultancies out there. So we have first Derek and Meredith from Atumos. They are running the marketing intelligence team at Atumos. Very relevant experience implementing attribution at a variety of enterprise customers, as well as we're joined by Allison from CS2 Marketing. So Derek, Meredith, Allison, thank you so much for joining today. Looking forward to a fascinating conversation on attribution. And the topic today is how to troubleshoot multi-touch attribution. And so we are going to dive in. Let's start with, what does that mean, troubleshoot attribution? So first of all, when people are starting an attribution project, there's often a question: should they start? Are they ready? Or when you turn it on, something's broken. What are some of your knee-jerk reactions to that question or that statement? Something's wrong with my attribution. Something's broken. What's your initial take? Derek, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. My first reaction is not to panic. You know, at the end of the day, everything we're doing with multi-touch attribution is not set in stone. It can all be changed at any time, which is a really great functionality of a lot of these platforms out there. But typically what I do is look for either over or under attribution. And typically when people say something's broken, it means they don't trust the data, right? There's something wrong with it. So that's when we get to put on our detective hats and go and try and figure out what that is. And a lot of the times it's like I said, you're either missing something in your model or you're over counting something, like email sends, for example, right? Probably shouldn't be in your attribution model at the end of the day.
Yeah, email send is a great example. It seems like it's easy to want to put all the touch points in there, but for something to actually get revenue credit, as we say, there has to be some type of meaningfulness to the touch point, right? Some type of inbound response. Others on the cast, Allison or Meredith, what's your initial take? What's the follow-up question you would ask if someone says my attribution's broken? where do you start?
For me, I would say I think it's mostly my knee-jerk reaction is that people take the data maybe too literally, in that they're looking at the dollar amount and saying, well, that webinar didn't bring in X amount of pipeline or X amount of revenue. And I think it's important to remember that the attribution models are models. And one of the quotes that's often quoted is all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think the power of the model is that, you're applying kind of that same algorithm to all of your touch points. And in applying that, comparing and contrasting your touch points and kind of figuring out what channels, which tactics are performing well and which ones aren't, and kind of adjusting is really the power of the attribution model, less so in the literal dollars that you're seeing in the model.
Yeah, that's so true. I think a big mistake I've seen folks make is, take it literally, as you're saying. Attribution is meant to be directional. And if the expectations are set that, hey, clicking on this email isn't the thing that exactly made this $100 million opportunity. There's, salespeople involved. There's other touches involved. There's maybe other things happening behind the scenes. But, there is indisputable fact that maybe the person that had that opportunity did click on that email. So it's still useful, but using many models in tandem as well could be something that each could tell a different story. So, what model you choose could also be important. Meredith, yeah, I would love to hear your take on this question as well. What are some things
Hi.
you immediately look at or run into when this is brought up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Derek and Allison really summed it up very well. I mean, most of the time it's coming back to the educational piece and making sure that the teams understand how their attribution model is set up, and really starting with the question of, well, why do you think this is wrong? So let's talk about why you think this is wrong, and then go back through and figure out where that why is coming into play. I think that attribution is really helpful at a wide out view, but a lot of times you need to look in at the details to understand and really provide that context of why you're getting the numbers that you're getting. And once you're able to do that, I think the light bulb normally clicks for a lot of teams of, oh, it's not wrong, it's not a problem, we just have to reevaluate the way it's set up or understand why these decisions have been made. So I don't normally see that something is a problem. It's usually coming down to the educational piece and really just making sure that all of the teams that are looking at the data understand the data.
Yeah, understanding is key. Knowledge is power. And I like what Derek said about the trust of the data as well, because you could have garbage in, garbage out. It sounds cliche, but if you don't trust the data going in, it's going to be hard to trust the model. And the usefulness, right, Allison, is maybe questionable. So, all right, moving on here. So this is kind of what sparked the conversation as far as troubleshooting attribution. There's another facet to this, which is around adopting attribution. So, from my experience, there'll be one or two champions that maybe are leading the charge on an attribution project. And then at some point, they have to take this model and socialize it, shop it around, get others' opinions. These could be stakeholders from marketing, sales, finance, other aspects of the organization. So what are some pitfalls that you've seen these champions encounter as they're trying to gain this cross-functional buy-in? And then, they'll get there and then they'll talk to the demand gen manager or VP of content, whomever, and they say, I can't use this thing. Where's the gap in it? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I'll take this one and start out here. I think that based on kind of my experience with things, a lot of the times you have your marketing operations team building it, and they have a different viewpoint than your demand generation team or your sales team or your rev ops team. And so I think a lot of times one can be built in a silo, and you can try your hardest to have all the strategies in place. But especially with an attribution model, you need to make sure that there are stakeholders from all of the teams having input throughout the process, so that when your team has completed it, it doesn't feel like you're starting from scratch by presenting this to all the other teams and kind of going through and answering their questions and kind of keeping a list of things that they're asking for that maybe you didn't think about. So I think that's one thing, is that you kind of tend to see people complete it and then they don't use it because the other teams didn't buy into it right away. It might have been sold as it's going to be your solve all thing, but you have to have everyone there from the start and make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. And then I think that the other big piece is that when you're getting down to the granularity of setting it up, it can make sense, but explaining it can be very difficult. Attribution comes from a variety of different ways of setting it up and building it. And I think it is very difficult to explain. So you do have to have your documentation in place to be able to explain. You have to have the teams that are explaining it, being able to talk about it to a variety of different stakeholders at a variety of different levels, so that it is successful when they're trying to use it.
Right. Yeah, there's an idea. It seems like it's not rocket science, but you'd be surprised, right? How many folks don't bring in other stakeholders early to get that alignment. Hey, I'm working on an attribution project. This is what to expect. It's not going to be perfect when we launch it. right? Yeah, all really great points. Especially I like the documentation point. Having centralized documentation and a song sheet that everybody's singing from.
Yeah.
Anyone else, Alison or Derek? What's the barrier to adoption in an attribution project?
I can go. I think there are two things that I immediately think of, and one is that, a lot of the dashboards and reports that you end up building using the tool are really meant for, what we call exploratory analysis, in that they don't immediately tell you, hey, like these are the insights that you should take from it. And so there's a step further that often people skip in taking your exploratory analysis, turning it into explanatory analysis, and curating those insights for your audience so that they don't have that burden of the cognitive load when you just show them the dashboard and they immediately start pointing to things that they feel are wrong. So that's part of it. And then I think maybe potentially a controversial point of view is often I feel that attribution tools, the intention of them aren't necessarily for an executive audience. The intention of them are more for the marketing practitioners. So instead of using it to prove that marketing is doing a good job, it's really meant to improve what you're doing, kind of comparing channels and tactics and figuring out, what's driving the needle so that you can essentially increase your ROI with the same amount of budget, or if you get more budget, knowing exactly where you're going to put it because you're looking at your data and understanding what's working, what's not.
Yeah, Derek, I saw you doing a +1 applause there. Did you have something to add as far as the executive readiness and piece?
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Typically what we see is people going to executives with 4, 5, 6 different models and be like, First Touch says this, linear model says this. And at the end of the day, they don't care, right? All they want to know is how much better you did than last month, last quarter, what your total year is, right? And going back to kind of the use case of not being able to use it, right? I think a lot of it comes from sticker shock of what you see after you get a successful implementation, right? A lot of people are used to last touch attribution, which is the default in Salesforce, right? Or any other CRM that you might have. And all of a sudden, once you're complete, you've now opened up all of this post-op creation pipeline influence revenue. And sometimes we see it double or triple a marketing team's numbers. So the believability aspect can definitely be difficult in some organizations.
And I'll add, it's a hill that I've seen marketing ops professionals die on, defending the numbers in that respect and not couching it in that, hey, directionality. These might not be the metrics that a CFO could care about. That said, it could open up your organization to become more data driven. One of the things I've noticed in implementing attribution projects is you start with trying to solve attribution and you're centralizing your data, you're cleaning it, you're building all the integration points. You have an attribution model, but there's still a couple steps to get it into, maybe there's other models that are more pertinent to a CXO level. And even the level in between. So, how when you think of like a campaign manager and what they want out of attribution versus, say, a director of growth that they more are interested in potentially initiatives versus, say, which it was email number 1 or email number 2 that got the click. So, are there any other tips or tangential reports coming out of attribution that can help you slowly level up in the organization, even though you might not jump to the CFO or CMO? Maybe there are views of attribution that are useful in those director VP level. Are there any tips
Yeah,
or
I
views
can.
that you've seen kind of bridge that?
Yeah, I don't mind tackling this one. One of the things I like to look at before we even start looking at the models is marketing influence versus sourced, right? And
Mm,
when you get a lot of these MTA platforms that are not only tracking when the engagement occurred, but any subsequent life cycle stages that may have been impacted by that engagement, you really get a great insight into what marketing influence looks like over time.
mm,
And I tend to think that if you start showing that number, it's more influential, excuse me, versus just marketing source. Because then you get to do some really cool things like what percentage of the total pipeline and revenue has marketing influenced month over month, quarter over quarter. Stop reporting in those silos of marketing generated X pipeline and say marketing generated X percentage of the entire organization or X influence of the entire organization. And those types of reports, before you even start looking at the models, are extremely influential. I cannot say that
mhm.
word today.
Well,
They're
pun
extremely influential.
intended, influence attribution. Yeah, no, that's a great tip. Anyone else? And then I have some thoughts on this as well.
I think just one simple thing too that people often forget is just to look at some really important key deals that were either like won or lost and kind
Mm,
of backing into the journey and to like who were all the people involved, what kinds of things did they engage with, to kind of see if there are any patterns, especially among those really important deals, to kind of rinse and repeat. So that's often enlightening, I think, to folks when you look at a really important deal and you see, oh, they attended, this, small event that we put on and they downloaded these pieces of content versus this other, opportunity that was important, there wasn't as much engagement, and kind of even just looking at won versus lost deals and number of touches and seeing, that pattern of, hey, generally the more we touch folks, hopefully that shows in your data, the higher likelihood they're going to convert.
yeah, I think a mistake that's made is not understanding that attribution is a backward looking metric. And when troubleshooting these, yeah, that is the topic of the webinar, troubleshooting attribution. I loved your point around, let's look at the micro view and the macro view, looking at the macro view, the percentage of total marketing influence pipeline. If there's questions there and you need to troubleshoot it, I love the idea of drilling down to a specific account, like you mentioned, or an opportunity, and trying to figure out, all right, well, if this is the buyer journey. These are the touches that got assigned the attribution. What touches are missing? Why are we skeptical of those numbers? And then Meredith, I think you mentioned attribution itself isn't a forward-looking measure. It's not designed to tell you where to allocate your budget. I think all us attribution vendors are striving towards that on our roadmap now with generative AI and machine learning. But attribution as it is a backward-looking metric. So I really like the idea of dissecting a few key opportunities and then getting into a process of doing that when you have a key win. As a marketing team, review the attribution and the buyer journey of that win and see, did we tell a pretty accurate story? Did we get 80% of the touches there? How do you also pull in, start getting buy-in from other groups like sales or customer success? Do they get attribution? Should they?
I think that's a case by case basis, and I think that's
Mhm.
probably why my panelists are silent on the matter. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here. Who knows? But yeah, I really like to try and take that on an organization by organization. Like every model's different, right? Everybody's got a different use case. Sometimes your BDRs and your SDRs sit inside of marketing.
Right.
Sometimes you don't have any at all, right? So the sales CS touches, I think, are a very case by case basis. It just kind of depends on how the business is structured, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And do you even have the right infrastructure in place to capture those touch points? You know, are you tracking calls? Are you using an outreach or a sales loft, something like that, that's tracking email responses? And then how do you even get those touches into the model? There's an art and a science involved, and it is very much an organization by organization. I just mention it because, you know, I know there's sometimes skepticism from other parts of the revenue organization, and some of them in some organizations are chomping at the bit to be. They want to see, all right, which sales cadence outperforming another sales cadence. Maybe there's a cadence going to stage 2 in the funnel, and they want to dissect that. So I definitely think there's some utility in thinking holistically about the touches, but you know, maybe start small with marketing, and you know, it's an iterative process. Bring in some of those other organizations. So all right, we're going to go a little technical. I think we did a great job talking about the strategic aspect. You know, why attribution isn't just something you instantly going to present to your CFO, and then we'll get back there later, and maybe some ideas on how to continue to up level it. So let's talk about touch points and some more of the tactics around, not marketing tactics, as far as implementation tactics around making sure a project is successful. Can someone explain to the audience what UTMs are and what role they play in setting up an attribution model?
Yeah, I can take this one. I love this question. This is probably something that as I help different companies and organizations set up is a really big opportunity to train the different teams on what even UTMs are and their importance, because I think that a lot of the times putting together attribution platforms actually show discrepancies in the way that different teams are using UTMs. And as you kind of touched on, and all of us probably agree, is that bad data in is bad data out. So UTMs, obviously at a kind of just a web basis, are used to understand how someone is coming to your organization, how someone is coming to your domain specifically. So with attribution, you're trying to fill in the gaps of both your online and offline engagements, and UTMs are a really huge part of that online piece of the picture. And with attribution, you really want to understand what's driving the most engagements with your website. You want to understand where everyone is coming from and be able to group that information together for easier reporting. I think that with the UTM strategy, a lot of MOPS folks in particular, who are the ones setting up the attribution platforms, don't really understand how UTMs are used and the importance of them. And I would say the biggest piece of that is for data quality and being able to group those engagements together, just understanding, you know, the difference between a medium and a source and a campaign and how all of those pieces fit together. For example, you know, you could have a team that is using the value of contents indicator. That's not a good one for an online, but let's do Google AdWords. You could have someone with the value of CPC versus PCP, and understanding the difference and why those two values are different and what they're meaning, and having that organization across all of your teams so that when those values come in on your engagements, you're able to understand where that's coming from. And it's also easier for your analytics team then to put together dashboards and visualizations on those values. So I think that understanding UTMs, understanding best practices, understanding how it's used in attribution is really important for marketing ops team, and is probably one of the biggest things that I see that is not understood very well when setting up attribution platforms.
Yeah, perfect. Allison, what are can you describe the skills gap between demand generation, marketing operations folks, and the folks that are setting up these campaigns? Maybe they're digital performance marketers. They're not the same thing, even though they often get, lumped into marketing tech or discipline or growth marketing, lead generation. Yeah, what's the skill set there and the gap, and how can we help bridge that?
It's a good question.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
I mean,
Just call it
I
down.
think a lot of times, like connecting kind of top of funnel to bottom of funnel, can be difficult because a lot of, especially digital marketers, are really focused on top of the funnel, and especially like with tracking UTMs and having that go all the way into Salesforce, tracking it on your campaign members, being able to connect that to opportunities, and kind of drawing insights, not just like, how many views your ad got, or, how many
Right.
form fills you got, but seeing whether that actually drove the needle. Because like a lot of times you'll have, I know at a previous company I worked with, we had this asset on our website that was really popular every year, that a lot of, like, pretty much our entire database would download it every year, and it looked like the highest performing campaign, but it was a volume, yes, high performing, but in terms of the actual influence, not as high as maybe something that was a little less volume but more impactful. So understanding that nuance, I think, kind of going back to my point earlier about exploratory versus explanatory analysis, like curating the insights for that group and kind of drawing out the patterns that you're seeing can help them connect the dots a bit more than just letting them go wild on a dashboard.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think, and just to kind of maybe explain it to some of the listeners that are a little new to this, I think the two disciplines are much more converged in business to consumer model, right? If you're advertising for a pair of shoes, and then you're going to be compensated on, did they convert and as a digital marketer? But we all know that in B2B, there's a much longer sales cycle. So those top of funnel folks, they're focused on getting the clicks, getting the form fill, whatever, that's their metric. But what attribution allows you to do is start to now look all the way back to those top of funnel activities via these UTMs, track through digital breadcrumbs going all the way through to the campaign members, like you mentioned. That's a great best practice. Taking these top of funnel tracking links and making sure that the campaign responses and some of the bottom funnel activities have those breadcrumbs in there, so that now you can go back to your digital team and actually assess the revenue impact of their efforts. But I found in B2B that the discipline is no longer buying a pair of shoes. You're buying a 6-7 figure software that takes multiple buyers clicking on many different ads and offers, and then as Derek was alluding to, the bottom of funnel influential touches as well. So yeah, if you're in marketing operations and you're just in Marketo all day and you don't talk to the digital team, start making friends with them, understand UTM, because it'll make your attribution project more successful when you do implement it. So moving on, I do like this drilling into the skill sets. I know some of you on the call have built your own attribution solution as well, and there could be some skill gaps between using HTML to send out emails and some of the left brain aspects of maybe writing SQL or building a Tableau report or setting up a campaign hierarchy. So yeah, any tips on how to bolster some of those skill sets, and what can we do as consultants and thought leaders in this space to further our discipline and get us out of just the marketing automation platform, thinking holistically about the stack. Have you noticed this trend where marketing ops is being asked to do more, so they've had to become more technical?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has. Whether you're hunting for a job right now or not, everybody sees that director of marketing ops who also runs the website, who also does analytics, who also manages the CRM, right? I think even though this profession has been around for some time now, it's still relatively young. And a lot of organizations take advantage of that, whether maliciously or not, I guess, is to be decided for each company. But yeah, the big thing for me is just get out there and learn something, right? If you don't have the budget to hire an analyst or a scientist or an engineer or you know, an army of MOPS people, you know, bolster your resume. Go talk to ChatGPT for 30 minutes. More often than not,
Love that.
it's correct about a lot of these things, right?
I hate that it's right all the time, but it usually is.
As someone
Yeah,
who tries to break it every
85%.
day, it works pretty well most days. No, but seriously, I think the concept of multi-touch attribution is pretty well known at this point. The problem and the difficulty lies in how do we tie it back to the business that makes the most sense for what we're trying to do as a marketing organization. What are our goals, right? That sort of thing. And that's where some of the complexity lies. You don't have to be a 20-year vet in a SQL engineer or a data scientist to create Salesforce dashboards to look at marketing influence, right? And that sort of thing.
Right.
MOPS people can do it. They're some of the most creative and intelligent people I've ever worked with. Trying to pander to the audience here a little bit. But you know, sometimes it takes a little growth too, right? Not everybody knows everything. I don't think they should be expected to. But it doesn't hurt to add it to your resume at the end of the day.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, just the curiosity and the drive to be that lifelong learner is really going to be your biggest ally in MOPS. You know, there's not one way of doing things. I know I used to be hugely intimidated with SQL and the BI aspect of marketing analytics that now is becoming a requirement for MOPS. As you mentioned, it's under their umbrella. We've seen analytics move over there. But now I feel like I'm, you know, Neo in the Matrix. I see a pie chart and I'm like, oh, I wonder what's the query behind that, and what does the shape of the data look like? And it really took me a while to get over myself, and hey, I can just do everything in these tools. Have y'all noticed kind of this shift a bit almost outside of the CRM as data warehouses are becoming more popular? You know, Snowflake, you know, Looker, ThoughtSpot, the BI tools. Have you noticed that more of that is starting to fall under marketing ops, and it's kind of encouraging them to think outside the CRM and map of some of your customers? And then as consultants, I'm sure you've actually assisted filling some of those technical gaps as well, when customers don't have the luxury of taking the time to learn or the resources to add. So yeah, I'd be curious, are there projects that you're doing where maybe previously your agency was working exclusively in these marketing tools? Have you been pulled into this larger ecosystem of the data stack?
I think especially with kind of everything that Derek had touched on about how marketing operations in general becomes the jack of all trades, where we're looked to help make recommendations on a variety of things. And that includes figuring out how platforms work together, figuring out how to maintain the data quality when data is coming in and going out, and how do we do that? And we support a lot of the conversations about the cost of a lead and enriching it and life cycle and things like that. And it requires MOPs to have a breadth of knowledge across a wide variety of topics. And specifically when it comes to data warehouses, getting into BI tools, I think that it is important for teams to have an understanding of how they at least function, because a lot of the work that we're doing is directly impacting how that data is populated in those tools and what it's going to look like when people are manipulating the data. So I definitely have seen as more teams and the organizations that we support get into multi-touch attribution, they're asking the questions of, okay, well, we have this answer in our CRM, but we want to do this. And I think that it's just because there's an enthusiasm there. There's multi-touch attribution opens the door to so many more things that people are excited to get into BI tools, get into data warehouses, and figuring out what they can do beyond just a CRM or a marketing automation platform. So I think that's why we're going in the direction that we're going, and we're supporting some of these other platforms, because multi-touch attribution is just the start of it, and we need more to be able to have that creativity. But Derek said it out loud of, we are a creative bunch, so even without that, we can do a lot. It's not a requirement, but it has opened the door to a lot more things.
Right. Yeah. And Allison, your title is Chief Architect and Analyst. So I imagine, well, back in the day, there wasn't even a concept of a marketing architect, right? But now you're having to scaffold up these multi-tenant integrations. And so have you seen this change as well, as far as it used to be CRM and marketing automation, and we're done. That's the stack. But now there's, 11,000 plus marketing technology tools. So how does that come into play? Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
shift as well?
I mean, I have definitely noticed that. And I mean, a lot of it comes down to just some of the limitations in reporting within Salesforce,
Oh, good point.
adding more dynamic filtering, being able to join objects that you can't really join in an easy way within Salesforce. I think also, like, even just going back to your question on skill sets, one thing that I encourage our entire team to understand is just core database design, like that foundational knowledge of, like, what is a table, what is a row, what is a primary key, like understanding how tables fit together can really help you, understand how the data works, how a touch point is related to an opportunity, but also a person, and be able to support those, I guess, like models that you would be building outside of Salesforce. But yeah, we definitely support clients across, multiple BI tools. I think a lot of folks are just not able to get the insights they want to get to easily and support their entire organization in Salesforce. So having that BI layer is just going to continue to be more and more important as we gather more and more data.
Yeah, that's so validating to hear. I know most of the attribution vendors, they had started as a Salesforce installed package, and just because that was the best way to build a relational database quickly. And now we're seeing it, and CalBrMind is built this way. We took a data cloud first approach for the limitations you mentioned. We've seen customers use our platform for lead scoring now. Something that was always done in marketing automation. Now I might actually want to score things across the whole account. I want to score intent signals from Bombora and G2, and maybe not all that is just right there in the CRM. I want to do joins across all these exotic data sets. So yeah, I think that is necessitating the change. Something I want to touch on too, and love your thoughts. We did talk about getting buy-in from revenue teams and sales, but how can an attribution project actually be used as roads to IT teams and business analyst teams? I feel like the more folks you have in your camp, the better. So is there a good way to maybe piggyback on some other initiatives or efforts across the organization and using this data first approach?
Yeah, I don't mind taking this one. I think with the IT teams, you just kind of have to tell them that you're doing it, right?
Not ask permission, ask forgiveness.
Not ask for
type of deal.
forgiveness afterwards. One of the things I love to do is bribe Salesforce admins, whether it's
Okay.
Amazon gift cards or swag or whatever. Like, hey, I know you don't have this scheduled, but here's this super cool project I need help with, and here's why I need it, right? Selling the benefits, I think, is the big one. If you come up to them and say, I'm going to get this model and I'm going to get that model, and ooh, look at this model over here, it's going to fly right over their heads, right? So you really have to sell the benefits of, with this information in this format from this platform, we believe we can achieve this. Whether that's
the so what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with the data nerds, and I say that in the most loving way because I am one, the analysts, the scientists, and say, hey, this platform brings all this data together. It formats it in a way that's conducive to marketing reporting, right? And we get to do all of this extra cool stuff with it, and they're usually on board. You usually don't have to say more to that than them. That's usually about all it takes.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because sales ops team, they actually receive, yeah, they might take some initial configuration. They have to click the button to authenticate Salesforce and connect, what have you, but there's a lot of benefits that help sales operations as well. Like, we're going to expose all the duplicates in your database now. So now we're going to help you have a cleaner CRM and make your sales team more efficient searching data. We're going to help you with assessing lead to account matching discrepancies. That's what's in it for you, or your account hierarchy hijack. There's so many things that touch when you set out on the attribution journey. There's so many of these side benefits that you can uncover and unlock, and the so what from them. I mean, revenue is the goal, but pipeline is the goal, but there's all these secondary benefits as well. So we're almost up on time and ready for some Q&A, but I'll just turn it over to the team just to wrap this up. Are there any parting words of wisdom as far as attribution in general and things to considerations? What's some advice you always give in a short format when someone says, I think I want to embark on an attribution project, or I'm having trouble with my attribution project? We covered the directionality piece. I think that's a very wise one. Anything else? Obvious gotchas or words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is making sure that you have all your fundamentals in place, whether or not you're using a platform or trying to get something built in-house, doing your due diligence to make sure that everything makes sense with the way that your systems are already in place, so that you're not reinventing the wheel, but having those conversations about if this is an opportunity to reinvent the wheel in another platform or with another strategy that we're doing it all at the same time, or having it in place before you get into the attribution platform. Because I think that, with MTA, you have to have UTM strategy, lifecycle strategy, naming conventions already in place. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well for you to be able to group your online and offline engagements together and look at a journey. So I think starting out by having those foundations there, evaluating if you have the foundations ready, is a good starting place to see even if your organization is ready for an MTA, because I think it can be easily sold as the fix all, but it's not a lot of times when you don't have that there. And I do tend to see organizations struggle to get get everything in place because they thought that it was going to be the fix-all solution, and they realized we need to fix these other areas first. So I would say getting that in place beforehand, and then, you know, getting the buy-in from a lot of the teams so that when it is implemented, you're already off to a great start and can start using it pretty efficiently and right away.
Yeah, 1000% agree. Getting those fundamentals into place, and then you're going to have much more confidence and trust going into a more complex project. You know, or are you using campaign members? Are you using UTMs in a best practice manner? You know, are you using contact roles on opportunities? All these little like things that become obvious to us as you know, industry veterans. It's not always apparent to someone just getting started. So totally agree. All right, yeah, excellent conversation, guys. Really appreciate it. Triveni, do we have any questions from the listeners?
We do.
All right.
Amanda Riley asks, how often does dirty data prevent adoption, and does it play a factor?
Yeah, I can take that one. I would say that it doesn't necessarily prevent adoption. It prevents the understanding of the adoption. A lot of times, for example, kind of what we had just discussed, if you don't have a good UTM strategy, you can put together your MTA platform. It can take a lot longer, and you might be looking at the data and confused on the results, and it's going to take a lot of troubleshooting to go back and answer, okay, again, kind of what we started out with of, you don't have the trust in this. Why is that the case? Let's look down at a very detailed level. You provided the answer of at the macro level of, okay, our channel distribution looks wrong. So let's get down to the micro level and see why that's the case. Your UTM strategy could be off, it could be inconsistent. So you have to go back and reevaluate, and not having that clean data at the start is really going to hinder adoption of MTA quickly and ruin that kind of trust in the platform. If people are starting out right away with questions and saying, well, this doesn't look right because of the data at the start. And I think with MTA, there is a lot of misconceptions and distrust around it from a variety of teams. So I think getting ahead of that requires the data to be correct at the start, and to really look at that and make sure you have the fundamentals in place.
Also, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that oftentimes when you implement attribution, it kind of an unintended, I think it was mentioned earlier too, an unintended but beneficial consequence is that it helps you find what's kind of wrong. And so, which is nice, but I guess, I mean, to the point that if you roll it out to certain audiences too quickly and they see that, then you lose the trust. So like one way of doing it is, well, one, roll it out with your kind of core Tiger team group first, or, roll it out with folks who maybe are a little bit more analytics savvy and kind of understand how data can go. Data might not be accurate now, but we're looking to improve it, and then roll it out to the rest of the team and getting their eyes on it. So that can really help improve adoption. But yeah, it's often with a lot of technology you implement, like the good and the bad is that it helps highlight what's wrong with your kind of existing automation, existing data.
Right. So I think we're in alignment. The shorter answer is yes. Dirty data can absolutely torpedo your attribution project if not the expectations aren't managed correctly. You don't set the precedent that, hey, this is an iteration. This is version 1. All right. Let's figure out what's missing in the data and work to improve it. And then especially at that executive level. start at maybe some of the more hands-on folks with the data, and to try to get it into a place where you're finally confident to present it. And then, yeah, manage expectations. Hey, we're launching version 1 of the model, but there's a lot of duplicate accounts in our CRM. We're also working to clean that up. But there's an asterisk there, right? This is version 1 of the model. Have that footnote ready to go so that you're not saying, the first thing they're going to do is search for a key opportunity they won, or a key customer, and then that's the moment where they can just lose all faith if you're not setting expectations. So really great question. All right, we have time for probably 2 more. Triveni?
Yep. So we talked a lot about initial support documentation that can be provided, as we go into the implementation and onboarding phase. What support processes for other departments than marketing, especially, and I think of RevOps, I think of finance, I think of sales, ongoing basis should ops be providing, if ops should be providing that at all?
I think that's a good question. First, I'm probably the least qualified person to talk about documentation because I'm terrible at it and I don't enjoy it. But what I will say is that I'm a big proponent of data democratization, sharing that information, right? You don't have to hoard all of the data and all of the reports and insights, right? Sharing that type of knowledge makes everybody better at the end of the day. When you're working with sales teams on, hey, this is what our model is seeing, let's change up these cadences, or talking to finance about, hey, these channels are generating the most ROI, can we add more budget there versus this other vendor, right? That type of stuff I think makes everybody better at the end of the day. And when you're reporting out that information, as Allison alluded to earlier, not everybody cares about what model it is, right? Or, hey, look at this first touch model over here. Not super interested in that. Tell me about the ROI, right? Tell me about the impact of the business. That is the type of stuff that you should be sharing with the other organizations in your company.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add, I think that's a great point as far as the getting buy-in and ongoing trust. There's some guardrails I'd also recommend around that one, as far as every setup and model has some assumptions baked in. So consider having process documentation to make sure that there's not list uploads are happening correctly. And if you set up a campaign, it has a cost and a type. And so almost like, what are the rules needed in place when ongoing setting up this data in your CRM? What are the processes for what can you do in Salesforce to make sales follow the conventions that are going to unlock attribution for those opportunities? There's kind of that. It doesn't seem like it's attribution related, but where I think marketing ops could help too is perhaps figuring out what those assumptions are in the model and then communicating those up in some documents so that you're setting up a UTM. This is the pattern to follow, for example, or using a UTM calculator or a template, for example. So yeah,
One
fantastic. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one thing that we often do in terms of documentation that has been really helpful is, like, when you're building a dashboard, having either separate documentation, or if you can, like we'll do this in Salesforce, for example, build a lightning page with instructions on the side for this is how you use this dashboard. And that has been really helpful. And then even naming your charts, the question that your chart is trying to answer, so people are clear,
Oh,
like,
smart.
oh, I use
Yeah.
this to understand that. That has been enormously helpful for our clients.
Yeah, here's a cheat sheet of each of the questions you want to answer and where to get here's the links for those reports. Yeah, amazing. Well, we're up on time, so I really want to thank our panelists, Derek Gunn and Meredith Falk from Etumos, Alison Roos from CS2 Marketing. I hope to tackle an attribution project with all of you in the near future, and really appreciate the time today. Great insights, great conversation. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.